Mr. David Pakman, or as I like to call him, David Pakman. But yeah, dude, he's probably one of my least favorite on this scene, and he's really just probably more indicative than any other bread tuber of the grift towards the center, the let's capitalize on the deep pocketed Lincoln Project types that want to hear about Trump all day. Even, 6 months after he's gone, Trump is going to come back and Trump press conference. Like, dude, you're the only one still giving this dude oxygen. You're literally doing what got him elected in the first place, covering him nonstop and acting like he's a bigger threat than he actually is. That's the state of the David Pakman show. That's all he talks about.
Yeah,
all
it's the
long.
Voxification of BreadTube.
The what?
The Voxification of BreadTube.
Oh, yeah. I thought you said Vaush-ification.
Oh, no, sorry. The VOX, the Ezra Klein, Matt Iglesias upstart that neither of them work at anymore because it's owned by a conglomerate.
And it's what's happening to The Intercept, too. And like I said, it's really the whole David Pakman school of thought is really not a school of thought. It's really more of a business model. It's really realizing which demographics, again, are the most deep pocketed. And that's those kind of PMC suburban types that are terrified of Trump and love anti-Trump content. And that's not to say this guy is, like wrong about everything. He certainly is probably more reasonable than your average, Republican, for example. But I do think that's pretty undeniable what's gone on. And as someone who's been observing his trajectory for years, I just think it can't be denied. And what makes this next story interesting is that David Pakman is one of the dudes that Vaush has kind of groveled for the approval of in the past, trying to get Pakman's approval, trying to kind of get in on that lane. Maybe signaling that in the future he'll go down that path himself, which I've always kind of been on the lookout for. But again, hopefully this episode can reveal to Vaush who his true allies are. It's not these nutless neoliberal sellouts and shills like David Pakman. It's actual leftists. It's actual, anti-establishment voices that are unafraid to challenge power when it's inconvenient, when it's a little bit uncomfortable. And I think that's really best illustrated by this whole situation, which of course has been unfolding over the last week, and Pakman's response to it. When most of the rest of the left has been fairly unified behind Palestine, Pakman has been one of the few to buck that trend, and quite embarrassingly so. I'll say myself. We can get into these clips, but did you have anything you wanted to add, Zach?
Yeah, well, I think obviously, one, I see everybody knows that David Pakman was fucking hustling for 1 million subs on YouTube. So, anytime you're going to play that game, you're going to have to make compromises in your shit. I think it's obvious, right? Anybody that is completely unafraid to say whatever they want has never been able to get 1 million subs on YouTube. It's never been done. People have been around way longer. Pac-Man shit gets plugged by the algorithm way harder than anybody else's on the left does. I mean, even harder than Sam Cedar sometimes, I feel like. I don't know if I get suggested that shit all the time and I never fucking click on it. So I mean, I don't know how the algorithm works. We all will just speculate, but we all, I don't get suggested other like fucking loudmouth lefties like us ever. No. You know what I mean? It's always The Hill or David Pakman or Sam Cedar or something. But I wasn't surprised to see this. I mean, maybe I was, but if anybody was going to give a terrible take, I expected it to be somebody like David Pakman or Sam Cedar or somebody that's in that neoliberal lane, as opposed to somebody, even like Vaush. And this is where I will give Vaush credit, right? Because obviously I don't think I've ever said anything particularly nice about Vaush on this podcast. Here I will. You tweeted about it actually from the Vanguard account. He did that very, very successful fundraiser for Palestinians, which is what's the catalyst for what we're going to be talking about. He raised something like $40,000, almost $50,000, something crazy. I think you're muted a little bit right now, Gavin.
Yeah, he raised way more than that.
Oh, okay.
Here, let me put it on screen real quick. Yeah.
Holy shit. Money. Yeah. Okay. That's way more than I fucking thought. So see, that is 27 hours of uninterrupted live streaming. So this was fucking crazy. Yeah. When I didn't even realize that he was doing this constantly, because I remember I checked a while ago and it was like he'd raised like $50,000 or something like that. He kept fucking going. This is insane, guys. The amount of good that this money is going to do is astronomical. We always talk about how bread tubers should use their platforms to do crazy things that are really important. This is an example of Vaush doing that. I think that, yeah. And he said that he was going to cover the difference of $6,215.61 and put up a receipt because he's Vaush, And I just think that you got to respect this, and you got to call out good work when you see it on the left. And and this does remind everybody that even though we infight and we argue, and Vaush is a debater and he's concerned about strategy, and we'll critique Vaush's strategy, and I hope someday he makes a video about us and invites us on his show so that we can debate each other. But this was an example of, again, you said the left harmoniously agreeing on something rare. It was a good cause for us all to rally behind. Let's hope that we can start to do that more often by issue basis, because here's what I think is going to be helpful for the left moving forward is I don't have any problem working on a project with Vaush in solidarity, even though we radically disagree on so much shit. And I'm sure he would have a bunch of nasty shit to say about the Vanguard if he spent even a little bit of time watching our content. So, but we would stand in solidarity and work for something like Palestine, like getting people Medicare for all, like organizing a worker strike, because any kind of beef we have is really just semantics and strategy disagreements. Why would we jeopardize moving the ball forward because of that, right? And so anyway, I just wanted to say that I thought that was amazing that he did that. A 27-hour stream is no fucking joke.
No, straight up, all the props in the world to Vaush. Hats off to the dude. That's literally the best possible way to use your platform of that magnitude when you do have that large of a following or an audience or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, undeniable props. And
tapping into people who want to help but don't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we criticize people a lot around the time that, people were talking about force the vote. We criticize them for putting personality and stuff like that above substance. And that's the last thing we ever want to do. We're always going to put substance above personality, despite the fact that we comment a lot on like personalities and different people beefing and stuff like that. We're always going to give you guys an objective analysis of what we think is the right strategy or the wrong strategy, or where we fall on something. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people, I don't know about Vaush necessarily, but I certainly have my own opinions. I do think a lot of people put personality ahead of policy and ahead of substance in the force the vote moment, which of course had a lot to do with the extremely controversial nature of Jimmy Dore. But, Vaush is a controversial guy too, depending on who you ask. Depending on who you ask, a lot of people think a lot of things about the guy. And it's very easy to just be like, I don't want to be associated with this guy, so I'm not going to give him credit for anything. Absolutely not. When you do something that's worth credit, you're going to get credit for doing it. And this is undeniably an amazing use of his platform. And I genuinely do think that it's worth shouting out and saying, even as people that are pretty frequent and virulent critics of the guy and his philosophy at times, this is absolutely, undeniably a good use of time and money, which is why it's so funny that David Pakman couldn't meet that very, very low bar. Again, giving credit for raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for a children's relief fund in a terrorized country. Before we get into this specifically, I wanted to play this brief clip from when Pakman popped up on Destiny's stream. Speaking of, anyway, but just to get a little bit of an idea of what he does think of is the correct solution to the Israel-Palestine situation. So this might give some good context before we get into his response to Vaush's live stream, which is the main meat of this.
Okay, so no hot takes for the. What do you think? What do you think the solution is?
Eventually, like big picture.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what you feel.
I've been an advocate for a two-state solution for a long time, which will never happen for as long as the two sides are Netanyahu and a split Palestinian Hamas plus Palestinian Authority. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that will ever lead to a sensible outcome.
Just when you say two-state solution, like what does that imply in terms of like government structure and everything? Or are there different like thoughts on how this works?
Well, I mean, it's going to be one Palestinian government. Mm-hmm. You have to make the territories contiguous in some way, closely aligned to the 1967 borders. Mm-hmm. The one Palestinian government can't be Hamas. I mean, there's no possible way that that's going to be the case.
Of course.
And it'd be one government and sort of with the 67 borders as the framework.
67 framework. So after the fucking after they'd already had their way with Palestine, let's give Israel what they want and fuck Palestine, and also we get to decide what their government's going to be like.
Yeah, and of course the obvious solution is to defund the state of Israel until the shit gets figured out, and to broker actual peace and try to form a unifying government between the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. Any other solution is basically an endorsement of the status quo as it has existed for years and years and decades now. This further and further encroachment. Again, a two-state solution is just kicking the can down the road and saying, oh, let's things go back to how they've been for the last 10 or 20 or whatever years, while both sides apparently work on a peace deal, which is obviously not happening. That's just not
Trump
happening.
was brokering a peace deal. Like, go fuck yourself, right? And just to echo what you were saying, the only sensible solution is to say, hey, there's a region, people want to live there. Let's create a democratic state. Everybody is one person. They get one vote. And we let the motherfuckers that live there decide what they're going to do. And the people will rule.
Yeah, exactly. And as Rania Kalik recently pointed out, if you think it's like the Palestinian people and the Israeli people are just, they can never live together, if you think that's just totally irreconcilable, that they have to be separate forever, as she pointed out, people said the same thing about blacks and whites during integration or right before. They said, are you kidding me? These two races will never be able to coexist peacefully. That's insanity to even suggest. And of course, that was used to kind of stomp down the idea of actually integrating the races in America for years. The same thing is currently being done. And again, to even promote this notion that a two-state solution is what we should be working towards is essentially a ruse.
And that it's Hamas that's keeping the two states, that everything would be fine if it wasn't for Hamas. And okay, Netanyahu's pretty bad, but really it's Hamas. That's what he was saying in that fucking clip.
Exactly. And that's a good segue into the next part of this discussion, which is, of course, his response to the one truly commendable thing that Vaush has done in recent memory. Of course, that fundraiser we were just talking about. And this was Pakman's response when asked by a caller on his show. Let's take a look.
Can you do a shout out to Vaush's charity stream and Twitch raid? He's raised money for Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Hold on a second. That rings a bell to me.
He's literally looking at the Wikipedia, by the way. I looked on the Wikipedia. He's literally reads verbatim right off it.
Let me look that up. Yeah, Palestine Children's Relief Fund has been criticized due to its financial affiliation with the Holy Land Foundation, which was shut down for suspected funneling of donations to terrorist organizations. So no, that's not something I'm going to get involved in. That's not a good connection.
Hey, dude, you know who you fucking promoted and propped up over and over again? Fucking Hillary Clinton, the #1 recipient of AIPAC money ever. You know what I'm saying? Is that a good connection? Do you feel okay promoting people that are funded to the tune of millions and billions of dollars by AIPAC, which is undeniably a terrorist entity? Like, the Israeli government is that's what it is. Let's keep it real.
Let's look at our own fucking government. Our own president is featured right here. Let's talk about a terrorist group, right? Yeah. I'll volunteer to the United States of America as a great example of a terrorist leader, Joseph Biden. I forgot his fucking first name for a second. I'm sorry, but are you kidding me? How are you going to say that? We are literally we're still going to sell arms to Saudi Arabia. We are still going to sell arms to Israel. We are still going to do all of the things that we're doing in the Middle East with private contractors. We are still going to kill children. We are still going to be responsible for the bombing of homes, personally and indirectly. So all of these things that he's trying to label at, I'll be like, oh, we can't give these, Palestinian people any of our money. That could go to an organization that's been, tied to terrorism. We already know that anything that any Palestinian does to try and liberate themselves is considered terrorist. People will tell you that BDS is economic terrorism against Israel. That is the situation. So are Gavin and I sitting here endorsing suicide bombing? No. But what we're doing is saying that the obvious thing that somebody like David Pakman is, I'm using too many pronouns to keep this straight. What somebody like David Pakman is doing is they're, one, not being serious about the crimes that the United States commits at all times. And two, they're being completely disingenuous about their sourcing and the way they're portraying the issue. And he's being extremely reductive and straw man. And notice how he didn't even engage with it. He literally read, like you said, verbatim from a Wikipedia page. So
yeah, a Wikipedia page that, by the way, could be edited by APAC, for example. Let's be honest here. Let's not act like they don't have a pretty slick online operation, which is trying to influence public opinion on to their side. That's a very obvious statement is happening. So just immediately going to a Wikipedia article without doing a modicum of fucking research, and then turning around and accusing Vaush, again, someone who's groveled for your approval and literally been on your show, saying, "Oh, you're funding terrorists, bro." You would have called the Black Panther Party terrorists. There's no doubt in my fucking mind that you would have done that shit. That you would have been right along with those motherfuckers, characterizing the Black Panthers as terrorists. Of course, when you have an oppressed fucking class of people that's experiencing apartheid, that's experiencing subjugation, of course there's going to be radical factions that bubble up. What do you fucking? That's not representative of the fucking guy. And do you think? Yeah, it's just so disgraceful.
And he doesn't even bring up the fact that there's a massive disparity and a power imbalance. This is the same kind of guy who, in so many other instances, will apply this very clear logic that it's like, oh, well, there's a massive power imbalance here. So I imagine that even if you took a really simple issue to David Pakman and you were like, let's make this about something that's completely unrelated to Israel-Palestine. Let's talk about anti-black racism versus anti-white racism. You understand how those things are different. Like, yeah, it's not impossible for a black person to hate white people. However, the structural
the balance of oppression
balance of oppression in the structural system that we have that imposes those limitations on people due to the anti-black and pro-white racism that is built into the American institution. Those things are different. We talk about power imbalances in those ways, and somebody like David Pakman is really able to grasp that, yet he will not apply that same logic to a different situation like Israel-Palestine, where, again, you have a United States-funded military with infinite resources compared to and it's not even broad Hamas, right? It's the Hamas rebels that are... Yeah.
It's literally like comparing the evil empire in Star Wars to the rebel faction and being like, oh, Luke Skywalker is the terrorist.
And exactly. And it's like, of course, war is bad, and we don't support war. And I know that there have been people that have been killed on both sides of that, and that is wrong. But the reason that this is happening is something that people like David Pakman refuse to address, and they want to steamroll over it and act like, oh, these people are just crazy and they won't stop attacking Israel and they're terrorists. It's like, what are you talking about?
No context. Yeah, it's not like, oh, this is due to these conditions of brutal occupation and apartheid. Therefore, these people are resisting, and sometimes it gets violent. Obviously, it's going to get violent under these conditions. That kind of context is never given. It's always like, oh, there's this peaceful and sovereign state of Israel, and then there's all these like fucking crazy barbarians at the border throwing bombs and throwing rocks and like just causing a ruckus for no, like, why are these people upset? What's their issue? Why are they committing these acts? What's going on? Like, I wonder why. Maybe
China comes to New York City and says this is Shanghai now. It's going to get fucking violent.
Yeah. It's so crazy. The just kind of willful ignorance on this, and again, just a refusal to wade into any waters which could be uncomfortable or awkward for you and your, again, demographic of kind of PMC suburban liberals who want to hear about Trump 24/7. I know it's a little bit uncomfortable to talk about this in accurate terms. But that's why we're on the fucking left.